So definitely not something that you just want to pull out on a first date with a guy. Hello and welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel I talk all about dating and relationships and how to prepare for marriage from a faith-based perspective. So if you're interested in those topics, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along. And let's go ahead and jump into today's video. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing 50 must-ask questions before marriage. So just a little disclaimer, this is not an all-inclusive list. There are going to be other questions that you may think are important or that I did not cover in this video, but these are just some of the big questions that I feel like my husband and I discussed before we got married. And I know a lot of you have asked in previous videos how we were able to have such a short, I gotta catch my breath. It's that third trimester, running out of breath. A lot of you asked before how my husband and I were able to have such a short courtship and engagement. And one of the reasons that I've mentioned before is that we talked about everything, like really just everything. And a lot of you have asked what specific questions we talked about. So I wanted to have this list here on my channel for you to reference and come back to. Another little disclaimer, this is not a first date checklist by any means. These are questions that are going to come up as your relationship progresses. There's not a specific timeline for when to ask these questions. You will just need to use discernment and see how the relationship is going and feel it out on when it feels right to ask some of these things. Some of them are really personal, so a lot of these might be in the engagement phase or in the later part of the courtship phase that you get to some of these questions. So definitely not something that you just want to pull out on a first date with a guy. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get to the questions. Number 1, do you want kids? Number 2, how many? Number 3, what is your timeline for having kids? Number 4, what is your relationship with your family like? Number 5, is it important for you to be close in distance to your family? Number 6, how do you envision holidays looking with our families? Number 7 is, what did your parents do well that you would like to replicate? And what did they do not so well that you would like to avoid? Number 8, do you have any debt? How much? Number 9, do you have credit? Is it good or bad? Number 10, what are your financial priorities? Number 11, what are your thoughts on your wife being a stay-at-home mom? Number 12, what is your relationship with alcohol? Do you drink? How often? Number 13, what are your views on how we would maintain home security? Are you okay with guns in the house? Number 14, where do you want to live? Number 15, are you okay with moving and how far would you be willing to move? Number 16, do you have any family traditions that you would like to maintain in your marriage? Number 17, was sexual activity part of your previous relationships? Number 18, have you ever cheated on anyone? Number 19, have you ever been engaged or married? And if it applies, how many times? Number 20, how did your previous relationships end? 21, what are your thoughts on sex and sexual activity before marriage? 23, how do you plan to provide for your family? 24, how was conflict handled in your home growing up? And how do you plan to handle conflict within your marriage? 25, what did communication look like in your household growing up? Were you a family who talked through issues? 26, have you ever experienced abuse? 27, do you currently or have you ever used pornography, and what are your views on pornography? 28, what do you think our parents' roles should look like in our kids' lives if we have kids? 29, how do you usually manage your emotions? Do you share them, keep them in? What does that look like? 30, are you open to premarital counseling? And are you open to marriage counseling? 31, what are your expectations for how we would run a household, i.e. cooking, cleaning, chores, and who does what? 32, do you like to travel? How much? And is there anywhere that you really want to go or anywhere that you would never go? 33, what is your relationship with Jesus like? 34, can you share your testimony with me on how you came to know Jesus? 35, Have you ever experienced death of a loved one or loss, and how did it affect you? 36. What are your views on a husband's role in a marriage? And what are your views on a wife's role? 37. What are your thoughts on family planning, i.e. birth control versus natural? 39. Describe in detail what it means to you when the Bible says to love your wife as Christ loved the church. 39. What is your love language or langages? 40. What are your views on having friends of the opposite sex? Very important. 41. How do you deal with anger? 42. What are your relationships with your friends like? Would you be wanting to have guys' nights or weekend trips? 43. What are your views on divorce? 44. What are your views on infidelity? 45. How do you like to spend your free time? 46. How do you like to study the Bible? i.e. as an individual, as a couple, both? 47. What would you do if we could not have children? And are you open to adoption? 48. How do you see yourself as a dad? 49. What are your current weaknesses or struggles? And 50, how do you plan to educate your children if we have them, i.e. public school, private school, homeschool? So that is it, all 50 questions in no particular order. Again, I just want to emphasize that it is very important to also be praying for discernment through this whole process so that you are open and aware if there's any red flags that come up. And it's really important to be able to stand your ground and walk away if you are seeing some major red flags when you start discussing some of these things. Also, it's very important to be as open and honest as possible when you're having these conversations, because marriage is a very big deal and you need to know these things before you make a lifelong commitment to someone. So if you're going to talk about these things, then make sure you're doing it in a way that is as open and as honest as possible. And it's really important to ask these kinds of questions because it will help you to determine your partner's values, beliefs, and goals. This information will be essential to making informed decisions about your future together. Again, it's also important to note that these questions are just a starting point. There are many other topics, discussions, and questions that you'll need to ask before you get married. And again, there's some of these questions may not be that important to you. These were things that were important to me and my husband as we were preparing for marriage, but some of them may not be all that important to you. And there may be other things that are more important to you that you might add to the list. And again, use discernment, use wisdom, and also aside from asking these questions and having these discussions, it's really important to pay attention to how your partner interacts with others. How do they treat their family? How do they treat their friends? How do they act around complete strangers? What is their reputation like? And all of those things will help you to have a fuller picture of who this person is before you get married. So that is it for today's video. I hope you found this list helpful. If there's anything that you would add to the list, be sure to leave that in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.